Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Espresso with Matt. I am thrilled here. We have Maxine Legall from Thrive Inclusivity, um, who's joining us for a great conversation today about a range of subjects. Maxine, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. How are you doing today?
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, and I'm doing pretty good. Thank you.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, as we start every episode, we got to go through the most important question. What's in the mug of coffee today? What are we drinking today?
Well, I have this really cool mug that I got from Costa Rica. My
Oh,
husband
very
and I
cool.
went there back in November. We had a great time. We went on a cruise. It was great. And I have a cup of Roma, which is a caffeine-free, whole grain beverage. It
Wow.
has like a coffee-like taste because I don't really drink coffee. And so what I did was I put some nice almond milk in there and a little bit of sugar. I'm trying to watch my sugar intake, so it's pretty good.
Okay, well, I have my typical double espresso here, and just from the old Nespresso machine. But as I've said multiple times, I started the series. I've had about 10, 15 guests. Only about two of them actually drink coffee. So
Hmm.
I've had I've
I
had
heard hot
everything.
chocolate. I heard
Yeah, yeah.
someone did a smoothie the one time.
Smoothie. Yeah,
Uh,
so again, all beverages are welcome here, Espresso with Matt, and welcome, and but that's something I will have to look up. I'll have to try one day. That beverage there. So, well, thank you so much for joining. We've had some conversations. We've connected through LinkedIn, and I can tell you, a few people in my network were saying, "Oh, you gotta talk to Maxine. You gotta connect with Maxine." So, you
nice.
know, I'm really honored that you're on the show today. Just for everyone out there, kind of go through a little bit of a overview of what you do, your history or your work history, and a little bit about yourself professionally, if you may.
Absolutely. I actually wanted to be a social worker. I mean, I still have a master's degree in social work. I don't actually practice as a clinical social worker. But when I finished graduate school, I worked for a really great organization called Big Brothers Big Sisters. I was there for about 2 years. I loved the work, but I got an opportunity to go into healthcare and manage the volunteer office at New York Presbyterian. Then I fell in love with healthcare, stayed at Presbyterian for several years, went into the for-profit sector for a while. And then unfortunately, when the bubble burst, I was left without a job. I came back into healthcare. And this time I really dug my heels in deep. I worked at Northwell. I started off in their home care. I worked my way up. I became a volunteer coordinator. And then I moved into becoming a volunteer manager. And then I actually moved into patient experience. After I finished my MBA, which thankfully Northwell paid for, I was offered a position to manage patient experience for the Children's Hospital. And I loved that job. And it was my first experience with patient satisfaction. And I fell in love with that. Then I left Northwell and went to work for Mount Sinai. So as you can see, I've moved around. I've been at Presbyterian, I've been at Northwell and Mount Sinai, all wonderful organizations, and I pulled the best that I could out of each of them. When I
Wow.
went to Mount Sinai, I really went deeper into patient experience, and my work also touched diversity, equity, and inclusion as well, specifically around health equity. And I loved that work. And then I left Mount Sinai to work for a not-for-profit as their DEI chief. And I did that for about 2 years. Fast forward, after being there for 2 years, unfortunately, they had some financial limitations and they did do some layoffs, and my position was eliminated. But I think that opened a door for me to start my own company.
Yeah.
So a lot of people can look at that and say, oh, that's terrible. I can't believe that happened. I don't see it as something bad. I believe that everything happens in life for a reason. And so I started my company, Thrive Inclusively, in March of 2024. And I wanted to do what I've always done, just in all the different roles that I've had. I enjoy engaging. I enjoy engaging with people. I love to build healthy and inclusive cultures. I love to help and enhance employee engagement. I enjoy coaching. I enjoy making workplaces fun and interesting, and I love to inspire people. And I believe in leadership and leadership development. So that's really where I am now.
Awesome. Maxine, first of all, it's very funny how God works sometimes. Someone
Mhm.
told me this just yesterday. I was meeting with someone and they messaged me back and they said, "We're going to help you find. I'm sorry I can't help you find a job right now. It's going to help you bring value." And I wrote back. I said, "My value is not tied to my job. I'm I'm doing a lot of really cool things now. And so I love your story about you have that degree in social work, and your whole career has been about connecting people in various different ways. You go after an MBA. How many MSWs and MBAs out there? So that's a pretty unique skill set out there. I love your story about how you're connecting those dots, and now when a new opportunity bringing value in a different way. It's inspiring to me. And quite frankly, for me, I worked in one organization for 25 years in various roles in behavioral health, ultimately becoming a VP in that role.
Wonderful.
But I feel like I'm doing as much or more value now than
Yeah.
what I'm doing using those skills I built over those years. So I love that story. And
And
so
that's
many
the
different.
beauty of it, right? You
Yeah,
took everything that you learned from that role and any other role that you've had, and you use it as a means to continue to do your passion and to do what you enjoy. And I want people to know that. Like every role you've had, whether it ended well or whether it ended poorly, you learned something there. That's a gift. Use that gift.
it truly is. And it's a perspective I think that I'm finding more and more people come to over the last few years.
Hmm.
And I think one of the shifts you're seeing in society right
Hmm.
now,
Hmm.
and for a lot of reasons, I think first of all, technology. I mean, with a few dollars, you can get yourself the subscriptions you need, the
Hmm.
technology you need
Hmm.
to pretty much be your own brand in many
Yes. Yes.
ways.
Yes.
Um, but I see more and more people out there kind of defining their pathway and defining what they're doing. And what I'm very interested about is defining a pathway, but also having the intersection of value and society gains. And I love what you talk about, what you do in your business, and how you've connected the dots of, you know, your coaching, your leadership development, your training, but you're connecting to that higher purpose of inclusivity, of of engagement, of people being their true self at work and for leadership. I love that pathway. And a few things I want to talk a little bit specifically with you. Um, First of all, employee engagement.
Mm.
Everything you see out there right now is showing employee engagement is down. It's trending downwards. People are less connected to purpose and less connected at work,
Yes.
and people are worried about it. Um, What has your experience been in that employee engagement arena? Maybe talk a little about what you really look for and measure in employee engagement. If you had to kind of give the recipe card, what are some of the key ingredients that you put on your recipe for the best employee engagement you can have?
I want to start with a story.
Of
You
course.
know, when I went to work for an organization a few years ago, it was a hospital that had been going through a transition, and it was a hospital with a very rich history. And so when I came in, I was working with a new president, and he brought in a new team, and we wanted to really energize the culture. And what we started doing was we started asking, well, who was this hospital before we got here? What is the history? What are the values? What do employees hold true to themselves? What's important to them as individuals? And we did focus groups and we asked questions. I worked with a assistant director of communication at the time. She was phenomenal. And she created a survey to ask, what are the values? What do you think our values should be? And what we unearthed was actually a very rich culture that existed before we got there. And people said, we value empathy, we value teamwork. We want to see people working together. We want to work with respect with one another. And in healthcare, that's very critical. That's important.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so I think that for any organization that wants to build or enhance employee engagement, it's important that the organization itself, they know who they are. What's their vision? What's their mission? What are their values? And how are they role modeling, right? How are they exemplifying the mission, the vision, and the values on a daily basis?
Yeah.
And can people see the values in the people that work for you? Can they see it in the leaders that work for you? And that's key. Which brings me to my next point. When we talk about people leaving organizations, we often say a person didn't necessarily leave the role, they left the manager. And so a poor manager or a toxic manager will kill engagement every time. And so, what are organizations doing to enhance and build and sustain and support and cultivate healthy managers? Because I know you know, I'm sure you feel the same way. Have you ever had a boss that was so good you didn't want to leave him? Right? But you had to because you
Absolutely.
needed to move on,
Yeah.
right? That's what you want to cultivate. You want to cultivate cultures where the leaders are so good. People don't want to leave, but they, obviously they have to grow and move on. And I think that's number two. So definitely mission, vision, values. Looking at how you're cultivating your leaders, building bosses that create inclusive places and spaces and psychological safety so that people will want to stay. And then I think,
You know,
oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Well, I want to go back to that leader discussion real quick.
Yeah,
The metaphors I've always talked about was you can send your kid to a great school district.
yep,
They have a bad teacher, not going to go so well. You can go to a world-class restaurant and your waiter,
yeah,
not so great.
doesn't matter.
It could really impact your experience there. And so even great organizations have to be attuned to the idea that the individual experience is so tied
Yeah.
to the people you work with. And it's formal leaders and informal leaders. You'll appreciate this for being from healthcare. For my first 2 years, I was direct care in Huntsville. I didn't really know who my boss was. I thought it was a scheduling coordinator because I was the person who gave me off on a Saturday if I asked for off.
Right.
So back in 20, I was 23, 24, the person who actually, granted my PTO request, I thought was the boss, and it really wasn't. And so I think engagement is so important. I love that theme there, and it's important to look at that and really, no matter where you are on the engagement scale. Great point.
Can I say one other thing?
Of course,
And
absolutely.
the final bullet I want to make is, a lot of my work centered around patient experience.
Yeah,
And what they found was helping employees recognize their why as well, helping them realize their purpose and why they do what they do. People don't go into healthcare because they want to build widgets. People go into healthcare because they want to help people and make a difference. And so, helping your employees discover their why and their passion and what they bring, that's also important because, as you said earlier, everyone brings value.
absolutely.
And so I think those are the things that I would say when I think of engagement. Those are like the three bullets I would say organizations should consider when they're trying to enhance engagement.
I want to come back to that empathy theme, and I also want to talk
Mhm,
a little bit about your approach when you come in as a consultant leader or a speaker on those things. So let's start with empathy because I'm hearing that word more and more. And I've been really as a theme out there, and
mhm,
what's the opposite of empathy? It's really apathy. It's indifference,
mhm, mhm,
and empathy is a skill set that we learn,
mhm.
can cultivate, and grow
Yeah.
just like we can grow apathy and indifference. And I
Mhm,
think in healthcare is so important to really nurture that empathetic personality type. I agree. No one gets into healthcare to harm.
right.
They go to help.
Yeah.
But things happen over
Yeah.
the years
Yeah.
that they lose that skill set.
Mhm.
So, you were patient experience and you had all that experience there. How did you kind of coach, develop, and kind of really kind of cultivate a culture of empathy in healthcare? Because it does need nurturing. It just doesn't happen organically.
Right. I think that one of the things that we did that was very powerful was bringing people together. We did a lot of focus groups, a lot of focus sessions with people, and we mixed those groups. So you would have nursing, transport, environmental services. You'd have different people in the room. When they began to speak with one another, they noticed a few things. Uh, Everyone wants to do the right thing. Everyone wants to bring their why. They want to care. They want to care for the patient. And you also realize there are different sides to every story. And so when you hear that in a room, then you begin to empathize and say, wow, I thought I was the only one that feel that. Oh, now that I know that you feel that has an impact on me. The other thing is we actually made empathy a value and we itemized or we gave some action statements that gave employees an understanding of this is what empathy looks like. This is what empathy does. This is how you respond. And that helped the culture as well, because then it was more than just I'm empathetic, but then it was, oh no, I have empathy because I do A, B, and C. And I make an effort to do that on a consistent basis. And I think that's important.
I love what you talked about. And you know what? It sounds so basic. It's so part of the human nature to come together and talk.
Yeah,
And you know, we've developed as a society almost to build walls around the idea of what's natural for us as a society is to
very.
come together and talk and share.
Yeah.
And you know, in very basic terms, the more familiar you're with people, the more you get to break bread, if you will,
Yes.
over conversations,
Yes.
the more you understand and you know, and you more connections you can build. And you know, so to me, I think in this day and age where we've become so busy, we have
Mhm.
so many great communication tools,
Mhm.
but we're not getting to the point of having these honest, open conversations.
Right.
What a great point because it sounds so simple, but doing simple things in organizations are incredibly complex. You know,
And
you can yeah,
I would say be intentional about
yeah.
making connections with people. You know, I'm a part of HLNY. I'm a part of the Barrel Institute. I went to an event last night, and at Hofstra University, and that was also a really great event. You get to meet different types of people, have conversations, network, do what we did, right? After you connect with someone on LinkedIn, do a virtual
Yeah.
coffee or a virtual Roma or virtual tea, if you will. But make connection and talk with folks because if we don't begin and if we don't continue to have conversation and connect with people, all different types of people, we miss the opportunity to learn and grow.
That I amen. I mean, honestly, I think, and you know, that is so important. I think it's so tied to that employee engagement. And I think what happens, you know, I was an HR professional for 10 years doing various employee engagement surveys. In the end, connection to mission was always there. We were a nonprofit, you know. What it really came down to was connection with each other, having the resources to connect with each other, connection with leaders, being heard, being understood, and being responded to. Very basic human needs. I mean, once you get past the basic human needs of safety and food and water and shelter, the need to belong, have mastery, to have, feel some growth is just universal. Clear. And so I want to kind of transition that to you as a coach, a leader, you know, person who comes in. You come into an organization and you're doing these conversations, you're engaging with leadership, you're engaging with organization to kind of drive this. Where do you start? You know, how do you kind of get that pro? How do you coach someone to build a more inclusive environment and more engaged environment, a culture with more empathy? Give us some of the tricks of the trade there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm also a lean bronze belt. That was
Okay,
one of the benefits of working at Mount Sinai. So I think Mount, as I told you, I got something from every place that I work.
absolutely did. You
Uh,
absolutely did.
One of the beauties of having a lean bronze belt is that it directs you in how you should approach work, right? And so typically you'll start with really trying to get an understanding of what the problem is. That's the key. We can all say that something's not right, but we may all have different interpretations of what the exact problem might be. So when I come into an organization, it's really speaking with the leaders and speaking with the employees and trying to have an understanding of, hey, what are the challenges? What is the problem? What needs to change? And then once you do that, once you're able to identify what the problem is, you can start asking questions like, well, why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because this. Why? Well, it's a problem because of that. Why? And you begin to look at all of the hurdles or barriers or challenges that might exist. Then you really try to look at or correlate what's the biggest reason? Which one of these reasons did people mostly identify? And take a look at that. And then use that, if you will, to say, well, what are some of the things that we can implement to address that? You also want to draw from data. So if there's opportunity to leverage some type of survey or engagement, inventory or assessment, we try to do that as well. So you have data to work with, but then you're also speaking with people. And it's interesting, once you start having conversation and focus groups, that also begins to shift the organization as well. Because in certain organizations, you're asking questions that no one ever asked. People will say, I've been working here for 20 years and no one asked me that question. And now that they're being heard, that also has impact. So once you've identified the problem and you've moved to kind of looking at what the root cause is, then you move towards trying to put certain implementations or interventions in place
Yeah.
that'll deal with that specific problem. So it's a PDSA, if you will. And so you look at the problem, you plan, you do, you check, and then you assess to see if you've seen any movement regarding that specific problem. And it's important, and I missed this, but it's also important to be able to assign some type of measure that'll let you know that you're seeing improvement. Now, and there are two different measures. It could be a process measure, which is just we're going to commit to doing this every day and we'll chart whether or not we're doing that. And then you want to have an outcome measure that says, as a result of us committing to do that process measure, we expect to see an increase in A. We expect to see an increase in B. So those are some of the things I would do. I hope I
And
answered that
Maxine,
question.
I love the approach, and I think for me as uh, operations leader, I love the idea don't really need to know exactly what the problem is. Here's your method to solve a problem. You are very prescriptive. This idea you're gonna bring people together, you're gonna identify the problem, with the outcome. And if you use that approach many times the solutions to the problems are probably there or pretty much known a lot of times. I can't tell you how many times over my experience where um we identified some issue and we went back and like, well, we already have a policy on this, or we already have a procedure on this. We're just not following the procedure or policy. Why not? And that becomes in itself the issue. And a lot of times you go to things that worked in the past and were identified past, and so I love that approach. And again, it's about that communication. It's about having that conversation. When we have those conversations, when what happens? Like, what are
Mm,
the key things to have in those conversations?
yeah,
For me, I think it's safety, it's respect, it's emotion.
yeah.
But you as a leader and a coach, how do you coach leaders to really make sure they have an environment where they can go in and people can give you honest opinions? What's that? How's that approach?
Well, before I answer that question, I want to go back to something that you said.
Of course.
I think that when you're walking into an organization and trying to have these types of conversations, it is critical to make sure that you are as inclusive as possible in terms of the people that you're bringing into the room. Because again, we talked about it. Every role, every person brings value, and everyone sees a version of the work that impacts their day. So to the extent that you can have a diverse amount of input from people's perspective in terms of what they think the problem is, that is also critical. Because to your point, the solution, right, often lies in the room.
Yeah.
But if you're not inclusive in bringing those folks in the room and having that types of conversations, you're not able to hear that. And so then the next question you asked me, I'm sorry, repeat it one more time and then I'll.
Well, we'll come back to that. It's a great metaphor here. One of my former mentors said this all the time to me. You could take 10 blindfold people go into a room and touch an elephant, describe what they're feeling. They could all be describing different parts of the elephant, but they're all seeing the same problem and different perspectives. And that is absolutely
Wonderful.
part of that discussion. I think the other question was really about a theme about, how do you coach a leader to make sure that there's a safe space to have these conversations, to make sure that you can get inclusivity absolutely there. But the idea that you're creating an environment where people feel engaged, but people feel able to give you honest opinion. I can walk around, talk to people and say, how's everything going? Everything's great, boss, today. And then I walk out of the room and say, oh, this guy doesn't care. You know, how do you create that environment that really people will speak up and tell you the issues? Talk about that for a moment.
I think for leaders, it's so important to start with self and to lead from a place of authenticity and to do the work for you. I think that there are a few things that we should commit to doing as leaders. We should commit to taking care of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
That self-care aspect. We should commit to continuous growth and development. We should always want to continue to learn and grow. We should adopt a growth mindset. And we should work to be self-aware. And you can do that a lot of different ways. I've received coaching. I've done assessments where I had to do like an EQ assessment or some type of self-awareness or a personality inventory. All those types of things have actually helped me in many ways because it gives you an opportunity and a 360, right? All of those have helped me in a way because it gives you an opportunity to see yourself from a different perspective. And a lot of times, some of us walk around and we assume we're right all the time, which is not true. We can't be right all the time. But having the opportunity to go through coaching and having someone help you identify what your goals are and how you want to move forward is important because when you're doing that, then you're getting a good idea of what's holding you back and what you need to be aware of. In terms of working with others and being able to be that leader that walks into the room and asks questions and people actually want to answer you and be truthful, I think that a lot of that speaks to building relationship. And I'm my best self in building relationships with others when I've done the work for myself. I've done the personal growth. I've continued to learn. I've done the coaching. I have a mentor. I've thought about self-awareness and I've I've committed to being someone who leads with empathy. I think that's important because now when I go into a room with someone, what are they going to read off of me? Oh, this leader seems like he or she's really trying to do their best. And it's about building relationship, and that takes time. And when people tell you things, say to them, what you say to me, I'm going to use it this way, or I'm going to be honest, right? Be honest and say, I'll have to share it if you say this. I'll have to do it if this happens, but be honest with people. And then once you're honest with people, be a person of your word. Then people will trust you. And then when you come back and ask questions, they'll say, we can trust this individual. I think that that's where you start.
Such great advice there. And yeah, I reflect over my leadership journey over the course of 20 years and what I've done consistently well and what I needed to grow and learn from, and that you've probably made every mistake twice as a leader. But one of the
Right.
things I've tried to consistently do is be authentic in the relationship building part of it. And for me, that's kind of where Espresso and Matt came from, was that
Mhm.
I just enjoy sometimes talking to people
Mhm.
over a beverage of their choice, and
Mhm.
and again to know them and talk with them and share ideas. And there's such power in that. And sometimes people think, oh, there's no value in spending time relationship building. That's where the value
Everything.
is.
That's
And one of the
everything.
great mentors I had said to me a few weeks ago, you have to listen. You have to listen. And if you listen, you'll be able to, that's where you get the optimism from and everything like that. And such a great thought process and a great coaching tool. Absolutely.
One thing I want to say, and I learned this during COVID. I think we learned a lot during COVID. And
We
I think
did.
it's important for us not to forget the things we learned during COVID. But one of the things I learned from my leader during COVID was communicate, communicate, communicate. And when you're done communicating, communicate some more. And there were times when we did weekly town halls at the hospital. And even if we had nothing to share other than what we shared the previous week, we still had the meeting. And we said, we really have no other updates. We just wanted to meet with you again to let you know that we have no other updates.
Yeah.
And whatever we learn, we hear of anything new, we'll be communicating that with you next week. That makes a difference. And I think as leaders, we need to commit to doing that. We need to be transparent and we need to communicate. And you can never say it enough because no matter what, someone's going to miss it. And I also think that's important in building trust.
Well, I gotta tell you, action-packed episode this episode.
Oh, thank
I
you.
mean, lots of gems out there for leaders. Lots of things to continue with, and absolutely, I think we're going to have to kind of come back to some of the stuff. I want to make sure that we leave with this. You do coaching, you do speaking engagements, you do all types of events. How, if someone's interested in working with you, how they get in contact with you? What kind of services do you offer before we get to our favorite round, the espresso round? So,
Oh, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to find me. You can just send me a message via LinkedIn. I also have my website, www.thriveinclusively.com. You can reach out to me there, and you could also email me. And it's really easy. It's Maxine@thriveinclusively.com. My company, we provide public speaking, coaching, and consulting. I speak about a lot of different topics. We talk about self-care. We also talk about shutting up that inner critic. We talk about how to lead inclusively. And then as a coach, I work with people just around how to, and I mentioned it when I talked about that leadership development piece, right? That commitment to growth, the self-care, the growth mindset, and really working with a person on an individual level to find out, hey, where are you now and what are your goals and how would you like to move forward? Because you really got to start with the people. And then in terms of consulting, really here to help organizations be able to shift cultures, enhance engagement, help teams to be able to be more impactful. That's really what my company is about.
Well, everyone, you heard it here first, or but again, amazing stuff. A social worker, MBA, Six Sigma, patient experience, lots of different backgrounds there, lots of different services. Really, wonderful conversation. Now let's get to our espresso round questions, if we will. So our first question is, what is the best piece of advice you ever got over a cup of coffee?
Best piece of advice I ever got. Hmm. Let's see. I can't remember if it was necessarily over a cup of coffee, but I worked for a really great leader at Mount Sinai, and I was upset one time because I felt like someone took credit for my work. And he said, don't get upset. That happens to me all the time. But guess what? You're going to have a lot more ideas because that's just the kind of person that you are. And he said, I had to say that to myself. When it happened, I was like, it was my idea. And then he said, but that's okay because I'll have more. And he did. He had millions more. And so did I. And so a lot of times when that happens, we may get very upset. And it is upsetting. But the beauty of it is that when that happens, it means that we are beginning to put wisdom out there. We're beginning to put strategies out there that resonate with people. And that continues as long as we continue to grow and learn.
That is awesome advice, really awesome advice, because um, basically saying, "Hey, you did it once, you're gonna do it again." There's other, and that's just amazing. And past performance equals future performance, and so keep those ideas flowing. Next question. Go back and talk to a younger version of yourself over a cup of coffee, and you're giving yourself advice, maybe starting your career. What
Mhm.
advice are you giving yourself?
I would tell myself to be more patient and kind. I would tell myself it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes because that is how you learn. And in the end, I would also remind myself that God is ordering my steps and that He knows what is best. And so making mistakes and failing, it's a natural part of the journey, and that's okay.
I love that advice. And, I reflect on that over the years. And, there's not many mistakes I made that someone didn't warn me about that I made anyway. And I wonder if I would listen to myself more. I listen to some of the great mentors I had in my life, but it's such great advice that, you know, patience in your progress and having grace with yourself, being
Hmm.
okay with not be where you're at,
Yeah.
really can help us so much. Last question.
Okay.
You can have a cup of coffee
Hmm.
anywhere, anytime, with anyone. Who are you having that cup of coffee with?
Oh, Matt, that's not fair.
You
There's so many people. Ugh, I can only give you one person.
can give me multiple.
Okay. Let's see. I would definitely love to sit down and drink some Roma with some of the great leaders of our time.
Okay.
Certainly Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, um, Michelle Obama. And I'd love to learn, and it seems, I hope this doesn't come across as cliche, but if I, and not that I don't have that opportunity when I pray, but it'd be really cool to have a hot beverage with God because I have so many questions.
I
Uh,
think we all.
so many questions.
Well, if you ever get the opportunity, it's gonna be a big cup because there's a lot to get through there. But that's a wonderful answer, and I love asking that question because people have such range of answers, and that was one of my favorite answers of all time. Um, Maxine, this was wonderful. You have an amazing perspective, and really a very contemporary, very important message out there that
Yeah,
people really have to know today. And I want to make sure people understand that your teams out there, if you're a leader, they really need you in a way that perhaps unlike any other time in human history. And
yeah,
some of the techniques you talked about, Maxine, about inclusive conversation, trust, honesty, and being authentic is such a great theme. Maxine, thank you so much for sharing some
absolutely.
wisdom with us today. I really appreciate it. I really do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. It's been great being here.
A lot of fun. Well, guys, till we have our next cup together, thank you so much. Check out Maxine's contact information. We'll see you next time. Bye, guys.